Welcome, everyone. This is Jonathan Lipp from the Big Apple Film Festival. Thank you for being here. Our panel today is on documentary filmmaking. And we have with us two documentary filmmakers who are participating in the Big Apple Film Festival Spring Edition. We have Aminah Salaam, whose film Swimming Against the Current is screening with us. And we have Roger Sherman, who's filmed The Soul of a Farmer as well. Will be screening at the Big Apple Film Festival Spring Edition. So I'm going to ask first, we'll start with Aminah. If you could tell us a bit about yourself and about Swimming Against the Current.
Okay, so I'll try to condense this as much as possible. So yes, my name's Aminah Salaam. I am a filmmaker, I'm a teacher, I'm a mother, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm many different things. I went to Howard University for radio, television, and film. That's where I would say that's where I started doing the filmmaking stuff, but not really. When I was 10 years old, I had like a composition notebook where I documented like all of my favorite like compositions and shots when I would watch music videos. Very strange. So that's when I figured like that must be what I'm supposed to do when I was in college. I've been spending a lot of my time just teaching, to be true to you, but I felt like, you know what, if I'm teaching these young people that they have to, you know, reach for the stars, and I'm teaching them media production at this point, why would I not push forth my own projects and do the same thing for myself? So that's where I'm at right now. I'm just going a lot harder with working on my own stuff. My company is Abstrak Vision, and I'm just really excited to be here.
All right, thank you very much. And Roger, if you can tell us about your background.
Thanks, Jonathan. I also wear many hats. I'm a producer, director, cinematographer, still photographer, and author. I've been making films for quite a long time, and I'm very pleased to be here.
Okay, thank you. So let's first just speak a little about your own films, then we'll talk about documentary filmmaking as a whole. So Aminah, if you tell us a little bit about Swimming Against the Current.
Okay, so Swimming Against the Current is a documentary about a group of seniors. They have a synchronized swim team here in Harlem. And the reason why it was created was because, and it's interesting because we're in this pandemic state where everybody's constantly being reminded about death and your time being limited and things like that. But that's something that I've experienced for most of my life, is like people were dying at young ages. It just really didn't matter. So when I decided to make this film, the concept of death was just really on my mind heavy. And we're always watching things and they're telling us to look younger and feel younger. But at the end of the day, I don't know anybody who's aging backwards. Like, I don't know who those people are, but they're not friends of mine. We're all going in a different direction. So I just felt like I wanted to create something that would make people excited about the aging process. And these group of seniors, my grandmother at the time, at the time she was the president, she's not the president anymore of that organization, but they're such full of life and vibrancy and personality, and they're busier than I am. And I felt like if people could see how lively these people are in their 90s, then we should not be complaining as much as we are in our 30s, 40s, or whatever. Like, that we have the opportunity to live our best lives regardless of how old we are or young we are.
Right. Very nice. Thank you. Yeah. And Roger, if you tell us a little about the Soul of a Farmer.
Sure. The Soul of a Farmer is a portrait of an incredible person, Patty Gentry, who was a former chef at top New York restaurants. And she farms at Early Girl Farm in Bellport on Long Island. Brookhaven, which is right next to Bellport, much better known. And it's a film that, you know, for those of us who can afford to buy from farmers markets and from farmers, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. For the farmer sitting across the table from us at this farm to table idea, it's a constant struggle. And I follow Patty through a few seasons and just watch her succeed, fail, succeed, struggle, try to figure out what to do next. She rents her land from the activist Isabella Rossellini, who calls her the Picasso of vegetables. So there's a lot there. It was quite a fun film to make.
Cool. You know, a lot of filmmakers that, you know, whose films we've screened over the years have had a career where they have done sort of a combination. They've done documentaries, they've also done narratives. Then we've had other filmmakers that stick to just narratives and others who just stick to just documentaries. So, Aminah, what made you decide to make this project as a documentary as opposed to a narrative? You know, actors and why did you want to tell the story in this way?
Well, the members are animated. They're so animated, it's like their characters. So it made sense for it to be them. I wanted it to be a true story. I wanted it to be, because I don't know what's more real than like knowing about our time here and how we should spend it. So I felt like, and also just paying respect to these elders. I felt like they needed to be highlighted and their organization needs to be brought to the masses. People need to know what they're doing and support it. So that was one of the main reasons why I did that. And like I said, I'm also a teacher. So for me, it was really important for me to educate people on how important it is to value our time here.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So the subjects in the film themselves are
Actors.
yeah. Right. Right. Like yeah. It very often, I guess, yeah, with documentary films, when you have subjects in the film that are so interesting in that way, it's like, yeah, I guess you can view them as almost actors in their own right.
Yeah.
And Roger, for you as well, and you've had a career in documentary filmmaking, Florentine Films, and you've had numerous projects over the years. You focus mostly on documentaries. So why this project as well, and why you continue with documentaries, and you never, not so much in the narrative realm?
Yeah, I have always felt that telling true stories about people who are passionate about what they do will move audiences. And I just think there's so many stories out there that I don't need to do dramatic tellings. Also, being in New York, different places around the country, you can do perhaps work in both dramatic and documentary films. In New York, it's almost impossible to do that unless you're a trust fund baby and have plenty of money. But if you are starting out as a filmmaker, you really have to make a decision of where you're going to put your energy if you're trying to get work in the documentary film world. And because those two worlds don't come together here in New York, LA is also, if you're in Detroit or other Chicago or other places where they have smaller film communities, I know people, I've hired people in those places who have been able to work in both. So I also think that more recently, in the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, but more recently, it's easier to make that change because cameras, equipment, costs have come down so much that one can make their own feature film, their own narrative film. And, I fell in love with Patty Gentry in making The Soul of a Farmer. We had a little cottage near her first farm on Long Island. And I had gotten a new camera and I thought, there's no question I'm going to make a film about this woman because everybody falls in love with her. And I self-funded it, and that's only possible today. When I was starting out, to make a film like this was prohibitively expensive to make on your own. The cameras were enormous. It was 16 millimeter. So for me, it's never been a question. Documentaries rule.
One of the, I guess, most difficult parts of it is when you're dealing with traditional narrative scripted, you have a flow, like a storyline you're following. Whereas with the docs, you're interviewing people, you're looking at archival footage. So Aminah, when you completed all of your interviews and you had all of your footage, how did you go about organizing it so that it would flow as a story?
It's funny because I was just teaching this to my 8th graders last week, but I start with what the theme is first, and then knowing what I want people to walk away with, what do I want them to really feel at the end of it, and then just still laying it out in that way beforehand. And then, so that's how I guide the questions. That's how I figure out what I want to ask the people that are going to be a part of it. That's how I figure those things out, is because I want the questions to connect with what I want people to walk away with that theme. And that's how I do it. I interview the people first. Make sure, I don't want to say like, I like for the questions to be responses to be as genuine as possible. But I feel like if you make sure your questions relate to what you want people to walk away with, then it's pretty easy. I mean, I don't want to say it like that, right, Roger? Because if people haven't done it before, like whatever, but you just have that feeling within you, like you already know where you want them to go with their responses. You want them to be themselves, but at the same time, you're like, okay, be very clear about asking the right questions. And then that'll help guide where you want your project to go. And then making sure your B-roll connects to the different responses is obviously the best next thing to do.
So in a way, it's almost like the questions are your script. That's sort of the way.
Yeah, it's for me, yes, I think it is. I think that documentary still have a script. It's still a layout. I mean, some people just feel like you just go out there and wing it. I'm like, that's, first of all, that's disrespectful. I don't think any documentarian is just out there winging it. I think they still have a mission at the end of it. And then they're making sure they put the pieces together that connect with that mission. Does that make sense?
So yeah, so the questions are essentially the guide of how the.
For me, yes.
Yeah, and Roger, how do you go about thinking?
Yeah, I agree completely. And in terms of interviewing, I often think that the follow-up question is more important than the question itself, because you, as much research as you might have done, as much pre-interviewing as you might have done, and I don't like to pre-interview myself. I like to have someone else do it, because a subject never tells the same story a second time as good as it was the first time. So I try to avoid my own pre-interview. And then when you get there, you never know what the person is going to say. So you really have to go with the flow. You have to go with where they want to take you. And that's why you have to think, what's the next question and what's the next question? And I, in the early part of my career, when I was freelancing and working in television news and other kinds of things, and I worked with big reporters, famous reporters, and they would just stick to the questions that were handed to them by the producer. And I kept thinking, my God, you've missed so much opportunity here, So, and being flexible, you never know what's going to happen. You never know when a new opportunity was going to pop up. I did a film quite a few years ago, a country music film, and we were interviewing this band, and the head of the band's father came down and said, "Hey, would you like to do a horse auction tonight?" And I thought, yeah, I already had a 12-hour day schedule, but it made an opportunity that showed a cross-section of these people that most people don't know, a little tiny area of Kentucky. So flexibility is really key in filmmaking. And I don't use the word script, I use the word treatment, because nothing is etched in stone until the film is completely finished and mixed and submitted to the Big Apple Film Festival, it's just, a treatment is a roadmap, and it tells you who you want to have in the film, who you might talk to, why they're important. It helps you, the filmmaker, get a broad sense of what you're doing, what might be missing, and then basically you throw that away and just go for it when you're shooting.
Yeah, and a sort of similar question, I guess. So I've seen numerous documentaries, films that have been submitted to Big Apple and elsewhere, where you see a whole sort of a whole film primarily made up of interviews. It's all just interviews, and I'll say, okay, there was some interesting information there, but it was all interviews. So Aminah, for example, you have your interviews. How do you take the interviews and make it so it's not just a series of interviews and it's actually a movie?
And I'm going to be, okay, I don't know how to not be honest. I feel like the best part of being a filmmaker is that you're constantly learning from the last thing that you did, and then you're constantly growing. I feel like a person who's just like, oh, what I did was awesome and I'm perfect, you're in the wrong business, like, especially with doing documentaries, because you're even learning from your subjects, right? So I did too many interviews. And for me, I did too many interviews. I think I was too caring about what was said. I think I was also slightly scared of the seniors. Like, I don't know how to say that. So I was just so focused on making sure that I got the right footage from them and then it looked good and just pleasing them and seeing them in the streets. It was a lot because they're all in my neighborhood. But I actually prefer, like what you're saying, documentaries where it's like you get to follow the story and then hear from the people as well. So I say it will also just go back to just making sure you have a ton of B-roll. I feel like personally, I could have had more B-roll, but you should have way more B-roll than you have interviews, because the B-roll is the footage, is what you're looking at. And so everything that you're hearing, we get to have that visual of it and go through the story and go through that thing with the person and what they're saying. So I feel like having tons and tons of B-roll is always the best way to make your story really flow. Yeah, and that's what works for me.
Yeah, Roger, would you say the same thing, like B-roll,
Yeah.
archival footage, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can ever have enough B-roll. And while there are no rules in filmmaking, and I've seen complete talking head films with no B-roll that were fantastic, but you're right, Jonathan, most of them are just, after a while, enough already. Let's have some emotion, let's have some action. And if you work with a great editor, no matter how much B-roll you've shot, you're always going to get the question, did you get the shot of this? And of course, there's something you didn't get the shot of. So you really can't shoot enough. You really have to be thinking. Now, if you're lucky enough, especially if you're fairly local and go back and shoot more B-roll, you can key that to the interviews. My early cuts of films have no B-roll. It's all interview. And they're jump cuts. So you might have a sentence from the interview here, and then a sentence from the interview here, and a sentence from the interview here, and all those are strung together. And the head of the person is moving. That's what a jump cut is. And because if my film doesn't work by the passionate people speaking about what the subject is, I don't have a film. So you'd waste a ton of time putting interviews and B-roll together until you really know what the whole film is like. And you can, if you have a feature film that maybe, let's call it an hour film, it wouldn't be wrong to have an hour and a half just of these jam-cutted interviews put together. And then you go through and you start to say, well, that's repetitive, which is better? Take that out. This is going, let's move this to here. And eventually a structure starts to happen and a story starts to come out of the people who are talking. And I don't know that you did too many interviews when you did it. Sometimes you can, but you talk about worry and did I get enough? I think that's our job. I think our job as directors is to worry all the time. Did I get enough? Did I ask the right questions? As a producer and director wearing two hats, I'm also, not often, but I do end up fighting with myself. The producer has a schedule to keep. The director is trying to make sure there is fabulous things to look at. And so there's often that conflict. If I work with a very small crew, if I'm on the road and we take a break for lunch, I have a few bites and then I grab my camera and I'm off shooting B-roll, letting the crew relax and take care. I try to take care of them and then we go off again. But I never stop worrying. I think that's part of the job.
Right. And we hear stories sometimes where in the process of creating a documentary, whether it's through interviews or verite style, whatever it might be, sometimes we hear that a new story evolved that the filmmaker was never expecting. Aminah, did that happen at all when you were in the process of making Swimming Against the Current? Did any stories come about that you weren't even planning to present and then you did?
I don't know if it was new stories, but they were saying so many amazing things that I was like, dang, maybe I should change the whole concept. This is the other point that they made. I'm like, oh, that was a deep one, but I really want to stick firm to just appreciating life and all that. But there were some really cool things that they said in the midst of it that I did get conflicted with, and that was, well, I think that is one of the reasons why sometimes as documentarians, it could take longer to finish the project because you're trying to stay focused on one, well, not one, it doesn't have to be one, it could be multiple themes in the project, but you want to stay true to yourself, but then you're inspired at the same time. It's just like Roger said, it's this constant battle of thinking so much. So yes, it happened. But I stayed true to what I felt, but I also did add like subcomponents to it. It just made sure that they all connected. So that's what I did.
So there were things that came out that were sort of a surprise. You didn't change the story necessarily, but things you were not necessarily expecting.
Exactly, yes.
Roger, have you ever had a situation with Soul of a Farmer or any previous films where a whole new story came out that you were not even planning?
No, not that changed the entire film, but yes, that every day was a surprise and every day had things that happened, and someone would show up at the farm unexpected and I would just roll the camera and oh, is this going to become a scene? Will this happen? But you're right, those films where something just completely changes are quite wonderful. Not in this one, but I'm very happy with the surprises that we dealt with along the way.
And when you're conducting your interviews, are there issues? Well, Aminah, we'll start with you first. Are there issues with some of the interviewees, whoever, regarding like legal rights being seen on on screen? Is it difficult to get people to commit? Are they concerned about being presented in the public, or is everyone pretty cool with everything?
One, I was fortunate enough that the team is so big that the people that volunteered were like really willing to do it. So they were excited to be a part of the process. There were a couple of people that were nervous about showing their age. Mm-hmm. So we tried to convince them like, no, like you're still young, you're still vibrant. Like, it's okay. I don't care if you're 92, like, and I'm trying to tell them that, but they were uncomfortable with that. So you'll see some parts where you don't see their age, and then other parts where you see people showing their age and things like that. So stuff like that does happen. But I feel like the most important thing when you're doing these films is to build really good relationships with the people that you're interviewing. And I feel like when you're an authentic person, you don't really have, or I don't really have much of an issue with this because I'm so honest. I think that that's what makes the interviewee so comfortable. And I'm at the end of the day, I'm telling them, this is really your story. So like, I'm kind of like working for you. Like, this could be my vision, but at the end of the day, it's your experience. So we're in this together, and I want you to know that. So once you like put that into fruition and you tell them these things, then they feel more comfortable to work with you. And I feel like that's with all filmmaking. Like once you're like just a stand-up person and you're just being honest and making people feel comfortable, then you get the best results out of the people that you're working with. And I really, if there was something they weren't comfortable with, I was like, fine. I didn't really stress over it. I just let it flow the way that it needed to.
So
I couldn't agree more. I think that concept of I'm working for you is perfect. And the idea as filmmakers is to make the subject feel comfortable. And you do that before you sit down. If you're lighting or something, it's always stressful. There's a light here and there's a light there. And to talk about other kinds of things. But in terms of releases, you really want to get a release before you sit down with the person. You can get into big trouble meaning you might not be able to use the interview if they refuse to sign a release. And in my last film that actually won the Big Apple Film Festival, The Second Life of Jamie P., I've been making documentaries for decades. And as you said, I continually am learning. And Jamie Peeble's daughter is a major part of the film. If I can just for 1 second, Jamie Peebles and I went to college together many decades ago. He always thought he was a man until one night, like a bolt of lightning at age 63, she realized she's a woman. And I followed her emotional and revelatory and often funny transition for a year. And her daughter had a very tough time. And I made my own mistake. I put out the release form, but I didn't, before we started filming, say, hey, can you sign this? And she had some misgivings afterwards. And it took 1.5 years to get her to sign the release. We were almost finished with editing. And I don't know what I would have done had she refused entirely. The best trick to getting someone to sign is if you have someone else on your crew. I was a one-man band in The Second Life of Jamie P. If you have someone on your crew, you go off and you're lighting and you're setting up the camera, and that person goes, hey Joe, hey Joan, can you sign this release? And then it's no big deal, and they sign the release and everybody lives happily ever after.
And
Great.
yeah, and so once you have a project completed, you know, one of the obviously the most difficult parts of independent filmmaking is marketing and PR and getting the word out about the film. So Aminah, how did you go about finding your audience? How are you sort of
I kind of just want to hear what Roger has to say, because that's something that I want to learn. I'm trying to do better at. To even be sitting here with you, Jonathan, and having this conversation is amazing, because I literally sat here for like 2 days when you were doing all your interviews with the agents and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
And most of them. So because I am still, like I said, in the process of learning, and I think I'm somewhat too humble at times that marketing my work is one of my areas of growth that I need to work on. So I don't want to give advice on this. I want to learn. Okay.
So yeah, I guess Roger, you've you know, made quite a number of films over the years. How do you go about finding the audience, marketing it? Yeah.
I think it's really the hardest thing about filmmaking. Harder and much more frustrating than the making of the film itself. And it's changing every year, every month. Getting distribution today is very, very, very difficult. Distributors only want blockbusters. They're taking on very few films. I don't really have an answer. In my career, most of my films have been for public television or cable, and they already have an audience. So, you know, and they say, oh, find a community on Facebook, on Instagram. It's a full-time job. It's a very hard thing. And for those of us who don't have a ton of money to put in, it's just a slog. And it's speaking at festivals like this, it's getting into some festivals. I don't think festivals are the be all and the end all, but I think they definitely help. And people see laurels and they say, oh, that's an interesting film, maybe, because look at all the festivals it's been in. And I'm sorry, I don't have a magic bullet for you filmmakers. I think you just have to go with your passion and let that drive you, and get the word out as much as you can. You know, I have 5,000 followers on Facebook, and I do it for business. Are all of them watching my films? No, but I'm still posting and trying to get more people interested.
Can I
yeah.
something real quick? I just feel like, just following along with what Roger's saying, I feel like this is more for like, if this is just a part of who you are, like that's, to me, is what filmmaking is. Like I would do this whether I got a ton of attention or not, like, because I feel like I have to. This is just who I am. So I feel like if you're just thinking that you're going to get like a whole bunch of buzz as soon as you do something amazing, there's some really amazing and beautiful projects out there that no one has ever seen. If you're just, so I think that you just have to do it because you just genuinely love it, and then keep networking. I hope something will happen from there.
Yeah. And do you, I mean, I'm just curious, would you ever go into narratives as well, or do you want to continue with
I've done a narrative before.
Yeah.
See, like I've done a narrative before, like 5 years ago. I had no money. I think I like paid the actors with like Little Caesars pizza. I was not even working at the time. I don't know how I did that. Like genuinely, I don't know how that happened. It was an hour and a half long. It was a whole thing. And I love narrative. I love both. I love narrative. I love documentary. So in the next project that I want to do, I want to be a narrative. So I'm kind of going back and forth with it. So I love both stories. I think that there's a way to get swept away in the emotion and with the characters or the subjects, depending on like how well you tell the story. That's really all it is but like how well you tell the story and how invested you are in it. And then people, again, just authenticity. People can take to that. People can feel you through your projects. So just having a genuine voice can really take you a long way.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I was speaking to a distributor for documentary films at a festival, and I asked, I said, there's certain documentaries they made certain subjects where you've seen numerous films about the same subject. In this particular case, we were talking about Studio 54. And I remember I said to the distributor, I said, there's been a few films about Studio 54. How does that, what's the purpose of putting out numerous documentaries about it? And he said, well, because one is that person's voice and the other one is somebody else's voice, right? So yeah, I mean, it's just, however, it's your personal perspective that makes it, I guess, original, So once both of you are finished with your festival run, and you're seeking distribution, let's say it doesn't happen, you don't find a valuable distribution deal. Aminah, would you consider self-distributing? Would you put it out there yourself?
Yeah.
You would.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I'm at, like, by all means, is do what you have to do for yourself. Even like I said, the next film that I want to do, that's a narrative. Like I said, I had no money before. I have a couple dollars now because I'm teaching, but that's not, we know how much it costs to make films. But I just feel a tiny bit more confident in doing it. And I have a lot more experience in doing so. But like I said, I'm doing this because this is something that I genuinely love. And I'm going to make it happen by any means. And I don't have a problem doing some self-distribution. I mean, it'll be great if I could get the support, but I'm going to tell these stories because it's in my heart. It has to come out. And I just can't wait for people to be connected to it.
Nice. And Roger, over the years, you've worked with distributors. Would you prefer to go traditional distribution route, or would you rather go self-distribution?
I guess I prefer to go the distribution route. Not all distributors work out for you or have worked out for me, but it's what they do. I want to be a filmmaker. I don't want to be a distributor. That said, most films made today do not get a distribution deal. And you just have to not only accept that, but almost assume that your film is not going to get a distribution deal and start to figure out as you make it, how you're going to reach the audience. I have, this is a portrait of a farmer. It's a portrait of a farmer that's worked in restaurants. It's, Patty is friends with some of the top chefs in the New York restaurant world. So that already starts to be an audience of people who are interested in farm to table, who are interested in the environment, who are interested in climate change, who like to go out to dinner, who get maybe Eater on their feeds to find restaurants and things. And that's what you have to do, both to self-distribute and to work with a distributor, because you don't want a distributor who's just going to say, okay, I've got the film, go away. And I've worked with distributors like that. It's very frustrating and it's not good for the film. So you need to find a distributor that will work with you, that wants to hear your ideas about distribution. Most of the distributors, you know more about your subject than they do. They have big jobs. I did a film on Alexander Calder, the only person to invent an art form, the mobile. Well, there's a major Calder show right now in New York at MoMA and in San Francisco. Well, maybe my distributor, who I'm working with a distributor, doesn't know about those shows. So I reach out to them and their DVD is still for sale and they reach out themselves. So you really have to work with a distributor, but if you're on your own, there are lots of avenues to think about what this might happen that is positive and will grow an audience for you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess now to self-distribution, there's so many opportunities between Amazon and Vimeo, and there's aggregators and there's all sorts of opportunity. Roger, just curious, Isabella Rossellini, how were you able to connect? How did that work? I mean, because I know a lot of filmmakers are always trying to figure out how to get, a known talent attached. How did you do that?
Well, the easy part was that she owns the land that Patty rents. So she wasn't just somebody who would stop by. But Patty is very rightly protective, and she doesn't want to take advantage of Isabella. She didn't, often she would say my landlord. She wouldn't say Isabella. But I started filming in the fall and I filmed through the spring. And I would meet Isabella at the farm and she would see me and I would just say hi and I wouldn't do anything special. And then finally, when it was coming towards the end, and Patty then was also, we had become very, very, very close friends. And so it was very easy for her to directly put me in touch with Isabella, who's mad for Patty. And she gave me a fantastic interview. And then when she was around the farm, didn't mind that I was filming her. And I absolutely have respected her and not taken advantage of that situation.
Nice. All right. And finally, I'm just ask Aminah, do you have any other projects in the works right now? Anything you're in production on at the moment or planning?
Well, one, I was thankful that y'all accepted my screenplay for Blindsided. That's a narrative.
Yep.
So that was accepted by your festival as well.
Yep.
Right now, I'm in the process because, like I said, I do a lot of things with teaching and education. So I have a narrative that I want to do in the fall, but one thing that we're already in like pre-production for right now, which is another documentary. And I do this event called the Possibilities Tour. And basically it's like a citywide career day, but it's a traveling one. So the first time we did it was in November and we had people from like the NBA and just like a bunch of like amazing, innovative business people and things like that. People of color, just inspiring other young people of color in order to face systemic racism, that sometimes you just have to believe in yourself and reach for the stars and be excited about your futures. So that's what that is. But the next stop is going to be in Ghana, Africa. So the plan is just like document all of these different places that we go to and just show the process and how this all came about. So that's one project that I'm actually looking forward to.
Wow. Are you traveling? You traveling there?
Yeah, so we're going to go to Ghana in the winter.
Oh, wow. Wow. Very interesting. And Roger, what about yourself? You working on anything at the moment?
Well, yes, I'm working on a number of projects. One, I'm afraid I can't tell you about yet, but watch this space. We'll be back to you. But another one actually is a self-distribution. I did a film that some of you may know called In Search of Israeli Cuisine a number of years ago. It's a portrait of the Israeli people told through food, conflict and all, and it won a James Beard Award as Best Documentary. I got asked very frequently, what's next? And I realized I had so many scenes that were not included in the documentary that I created an event where I show a scene and then discuss it with the audience. I show a scene and then discuss it with the audience. And I was going to film festivals. And of course, COVID closed all that down. So I pivoted to a virtual event that is basically the same. I show a scene and everybody's like here on Zoom and I talk about it and people ask questions. And it's called The New Face of Israeli Cuisine. And I've been presenting it to groups around the country. And it's been great. So the self-distribution part is, okay, this is a Jewish subject. So I am sending mostly pitches to Jewish film festivals, to synagogues, to other groups, but I've had groups that are not Jewish come and say, wow, that sounds fantastic. We're foodies, This is a food festival. Let's have you come virtually. Hopefully I'll be back on the road again. Cool. So we all will sometime soon.
Sounds really interesting. Wow. All right. Well, I want to thank you both for being here. Aminah, Salaam, and the film is called Swimming Against the Current, screening May 25th, 26th, 27th on our virtual festival, and Roger Sherman, The Soul of a Farmer as well, May 25th to 27th. Check it out on our virtual festival, Big Apple Film Festival. And thank you both for being here and discussing documentary filmmaking, and congratulations on your projects. And we'll see you again soon.
Thanks so much. Take
Thank
care,
you.
Jonathan. Great festival.
Oh, thanks so
Yes,
much.
thank
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.